This is a 2017 Chevy Traverse with a 6T75 Gen 2 transmission in it. I was not having any engine codes, any trouble codes. The only thing it was doing was, I noticed when the transmission got hot, it would shift funny. It felt like it was slipping into third gear. And then I noticed right before I pulled the transmission, I noticed that it was sometimes I would take off at a stop sign and the car would barely move and it would shake real bad. Well, everything I looked up online said, they kept saying torque converter, and then I did a little bit more research and I saw guys saying, well, they replaced the torque converter and it didn't help. And some guys said they overhauled the whole transmission, replaced the torque converter, and they were still having that same issue, and it turned out that it was the actual valve body. So I went ahead and replaced the torque converter and the valve body, and I ordered an overhaul kit for this transmission. Even though when I pulled it apart, I didn't really see anything abnormal. The steel plates, the frictions, they all look pretty good. But I went ahead and I bought the overhaul kit and I replaced all the rings and the seals. Not rings, but I replaced all the seals and the gaskets. I'm doing this in my little garage. So if you want to tackle this job in your driveway or your garage, you can. You don't need an engine lift, even though it is a lot easier with the lift. I used a engine support bar that I bought from Harbor Freight. And right here, see if you can see that bolt. I'm actually supporting the engine. There's a bolt on this head and there's another one on that head over there that I actually have to the chain. The other chain on the other side is actually just wrapped around the engine mount. And I have a screw jack supporting the engine from the bottom. What I did was, I didn't want just this engine just hanging with this support bar because it really doesn't fit under this hood that good, like the way it's supposed to. So once I dropped the cradle down, I put the screw jack under it to support it, to take some of the weight off this engine support bar. But I had to remove, I left the steering column in. I left that in. I supported it with a ratchet strap because I didn't want to take all that out. So I just supported it with a ratchet strap. I ended up having to remove I took the steering knuckle out, as you can see, and the lower control arms. And I did that. You don't have to take out the steering knuckle if you don't want to. Well, I think you do have to take out the steering knuckle, but not the lower control arms. I went ahead and took all that out because on the passenger side, I could not get the axle to separate from the steering knuckle. So I just took the whole knuckle, including the lower ball joint, out as well. And you have to remove the axles to actually gain access to the transmission. Like I said, I saw a couple of videos of guys doing the job, but the videos I saw didn't really help me that much, because there was one guy, he had like 8 jack stands, and I don't have that many jack stands. I only have like 4. So I'm just documenting how I got the transmission out and how I'm putting it back in. I actually took the catalytic converter. A lot of people don't like taking them out. I didn't want to take it out because the bolts are very rusty on the exhaust system. I ended up breaking one of them off on the where the actual muffler is. But there are 3 bolts in the catalytic converter. I took that out and it gave me much better access to the starter bolts, because I was catching hell trying to get the starter bolt out with that catalytic converter in the way. But I got it out. It's up to you if you want to take it out, but that's what I did. Going forward, I will just take you step by step how I get it back in. It's already out. And the transmission rebuild itself is not that hard. I bought a book. It was the bought a book. It's the 6070 and the 6075 rebuild by the ATSG group. It's the Automatic Transmission Service Group. This book was about $40 on Amazon. And it's a pretty good book. Only thing I didn't like is I didn't need to replace all the parts. There were just certain parts I wanted to replace. And for the most part, this book gives you the codes for the tools you're going to need to do the overhaul, and the wave plates. Because even though none of my wave plates were broken, I went ahead and replaced all the wave plates because they are a failure point on these transmissions. And the This is a GM transmission, but GM, I think they teamed up with Ford, because the Ford 6F50, 6F55 is pretty much, it's not, I'm not gonna say it's identical to the 6T70, but it's very close. Some of the parts are actually interchangeable. Not all of them, but some of them are. I actually bought the gasket kit for the 6F50, and they matched up perfectly with this 6T75. So yeah, don't be intimidated by the actual transmission rebuild, because, like I said, getting the transmission out of the car is harder than actually working on it. All right, right here, what you're looking at is the photo of the front catalytic converter. This the Traverse has two cats, front and the back. You're gonna have to unhook the exhaust system to get access to these. But I'm showing this photo to show you how tight of the fitment is. It's very difficult to get the starter bolts out and to get to the cam sensor with the catalytic converter in. A lot of people don't like touching them because the bolts do break real easy. I would recommend that you use some WD-40 or some kind of penetrating lubricant before you. I'll put it on a day before you even start trying to take them out. And I would not recommend using an impact wrench. But it's very difficult to get to these motor mounts over here. The motor mount bracket bolts with the catalytic converter in. But see, this photo is with the bracket out, with the cat out, and see how much room I have now. Very easy access to the starter bolts, the cam sensor, and to the this front engine mount bracket bolts that I have to take out. There's one bolt it is very difficult to get to, especially with the catalytic converter in. So that's why I took it out. Again, you're gonna need like a socket with a wobble socket with an extension to get to it. It's like it is in a very awkward position. Getting it out was very hard, but getting it back in was probably even harder because, like I said, it's just in a very awkward position. All right, now I have I have this vehicle supported on two jack stands. I have I'm using blocks, and I have wood between the jack stand and the block, just because I didn't want the jack stand to chip the block. Probably not the safest way to do it, but it's what I had. I worked with what I had. If I had to do this job again, I would probably support the front of the car with with a jack stand across this front bar, not this cradle right here, because this cradle has to drop down. But what I did was I had the engine supported with the engine support bar. I dropped the cradle down, and then as soon as I dropped the cradle down, I pulled it out and I put a screw jack under the rear motor mount, the bracket, just to hold it and keep all that weight off the engine support bar. I highly recommend you getting the transmission attachment that goes on the floor jack, because this is literally what I used. I had to balance the transmission on this. This is a dolly with a piece of wood to kind of keep it stable. But the transmission attachment will make this job way easier, and it's about $60 on eBay. So I highly recommend you getting that attachment. I now have the transmission out of the car and on my workbench. This is not the ideal workbench you're gonna need, because once you crack this case open, there's gonna be transmission fluid everywhere. But this is what I had. This is what I used. Now this breaks down into two separate pieces. On the right is what I started with, and as you can see, I have my transfer drive gears, or this is also called the stator support gear. I have my oil pump here, the oil baffle. The baffle actually has a magnet in it that will catch any metal shavings that are inside the transmission. I have my carrier assembly and my pinion gear here. Like I said, this isn't that hard to work on. Once you get this transmission apart, just follow the instructions in the book. You can watch YouTube videos as well, but it's pretty straightforward. Alright, it's going to be an update on the Traverse. I've been driving it for about a month and a half now. Haven't had any issues out of it, other than I noticed the occasional shudder from the transmission, but I'm positive that is from the torque converter. I actually went back with a reman torque converter. I'm contemplating on whether I should just tear it back down and put a brand new torque converter in it, or just leave it the way it is. Because like I said, it's been driving fine. I've been driving it for a month and a half now, driving it to and from work and anywhere else I needed to go. Haven't put me down. I haven't had any other concerns out of it. If I could give you any advice, just go ahead and dump the money. That you can get one off eBay for about $70. It's an attachment that goes on the floor jack. It's for a transmission. Instead of spending $300-400 on a transmission jack, you can just buy the attachment for the regular floor jack.